I'm way more influential than Nas, and I don't care what nobody say. I know I made a little boo-boo when you talk about the sales and all this type of shit. I don't feel like getting into that rhetoric about where I started and where he started.
You said that,
but listen.
One man's dropping podcasts, the other's dropping billion-dollar deals. In this game, who really wins? The loudest voice or the quietest moves? When Jim Jones sat down on Club Shay Shay, nobody expected fireworks until he threw shade at Nas and downplayed clips like they were background noise. What started as harmless back and forth turned volatile fast. Jim didn't just critique, he dared to question Nas's legacy and called clips overrated. That was the spark that lit everything up. Pusha wasn't about to let that slide. He didn't call names, but the Instagram posts, the verses dropped live on stage, every word felt like a surgical strike. One line in particular had fans frozen. Legends don't beg for relevance, they define it. Ask your favorite who fed them. Everyone knew exactly who that was aimed at. See, Pusha and his brother Malice, better known as Clipse, aren't just rappers. They pioneered coke rap with raw street-heavy lyricism. For Jim to dismiss that wasn't just casual hit deep, but dragging Nas into it. That's where most people drew the line, Pusha included. Push has always given Nas his flowers as a true lyricist and compromising, never chasing trends down. Word is, Push is already in the studio, crafting something serious, a full-fledged diss track in the works. If it drops, it could set off a whole new era of lyrical warfare. Fans are already picking sides. Social feeds are lighting up. It's feeling like rap might actually circle back to its core, bars and sharp pen games. Jim, meanwhile, didn't seem too pressed. He got on another mic saying things like, "I'm way more influential than Nas," brushing off any criticism. He admitted to stumbling when he talked about sales figures but shrugged it off. "Nas was nice back when I was in high school," he said casually, like Nas's run was ancient history. "We appreciated him. For a little while." To some, it looked like Jim was just chasing headlines. To others, it was unfiltered honesty. But no matter the intent, there's no denying he lit a fuse. Pusha T wasn't letting that stand. When Push steps into beef, he's not here for sparring matches, he's known to end careers. The irony. Jim Jones has been trending lately, but not for the right reasons. One bold statement turned into a tidal wave of backlash. Fans, fellow artists, and even big platforms distanced themselves almost overnight. Jim's take, that Nas was overrated, that Pusha T's influence was blown out of proportion, even that Nas only went viral because of him. It wasn't just hot takes anymore. It felt like Jim was trying to erase decades of hip-hop history in a single interview. This wasn't regular rap bravado. It hit different. People felt it wasn't just competition, it was disrespect. And this didn't happen on a battle stage or through diss records either. Jim dropped all this on a laid-back podcast, the kind of spot known for casual chats, not career-altering drama. But Jim wasn't backing down. He looked right into the mic and said Nas never had the cultural impact people think. Then he upped the ante, claiming his Billboard stats were just as strong as Nas's, if not stronger. That wasn't just confidence. It was borderline erasure of one of hip-hop's most respected figures. Nas isn't just another rapper. Illmatic is taught in college classes, and even decades later, with the King's Disease trilogy, he's proving he still matters, still evolving. Meanwhile, Jim kept pressing, even pulling his own son into the narrative, framing it like Nas's relevance was just a generational gap. But the more he doubled down, the heavier the fallout became. Now, whispers are turning into full-on conversations behind the scenes. Some say doors are quietly closing on Jim. Shows canceled, connections fading, big names backing away without saying a word. What Jim thought was a mic drop moment might end up being the line that drags his whole legacy down. One interview. One quote. And now, the industry's watching. Jim Jones lit a match he might not be able to put out. It all started with an interview that felt chill at first, but then Jim casually dismissed Nas and Clipse, brushing off two pillars of hip-hop as if they were side notes in his story. He said Nas wasn't as influential as people claim. He called Clipse overrated. And just like that, things spiraled. The moment those comments hit social media, the hip-hop world reacted. Pusha T especially didn't sit quietly. Without naming names, he started dropping cryptic lines both on Instagram and at live shows. One bar cut deep. Legends don't beg for relevance, they define it. Ask your favorite who fed them. Fans didn't have to guess who he was talking about. Everyone knew Pusha T and his brother Malice, The Clipse duo helped carve out the coke rap sound, gritty, poetic street narratives. To minimize that legacy wasn't just a hot take, it was outright disrespect. But what really set people off was Jim coming for Nas. Pusha has always respected Nas as a figure who stayed true to his art. Now, insiders say Pusha's been cooking up a full-on diss in the studio. If it drops, it could reignite a lyrical arms race in hip-hop, something fans have been craving. Jim, though, kept doubling down. He said, "I'm more influential than Nas." He tried to frame it as generational differences, saying Nas was dope back in his high school days, but things changed. That felt less like a thoughtful take and more like deflection. Online, people weren't buying it. Receipts got posted, numbers compared decades of Nas's platinum records, Grammys, and sold-out tours versus Jim's quieter track record. Instead of cooling off, Jim popped back up. This time he was face-to-face with Shannon Sharpe, repeating that same line, "Nas never really had that kind of influence." Then he went even further, claiming Nas was always second best, ranking behind Jay-Z and DMX. But here's where things lost all sense. Comparing those three wasn't apples to apples. Nas gave us introspective street poetry, Jay chased billionaire moves, and DMX bared raw pain and honesty. It wasn't about stats, it was about different lanes. Jim's logic started sounding shaky, especially since he admitted he used to idolize Nas back in the day, down to the style, the music, the wordplay. So why the sudden switch up? Jim even brought up Nas's role in the movie Belly, like somehow that undermined Nas's legacy. People online were baffled. This wasn't about opinions anymore. It felt like Jim was scrambling for relevance by tearing others down. And just when it seemed like he couldn't push it further, Jim hit another podcast and claimed he was the reason Nas went viral again. He said the game owed him credit for bringing Nas back into the conversation. The internet didn't hold back. One fan clapped back. "The only reason people interview you now is because you're saying wild stuff about Nas." Another said, "Straight up, the delusion is next level." At that point, Jim wasn't boosting his image, he was tanking it in real time. Nas had dropped 3 full albums in 5 years, won a Grammy, and was packing out venues around the world, all while keeping his art sharp and evolving. Meanwhile, Jim's music wasn't hitting like that. His name stayed trending for interviews, not records. Then came Paris, 2024. Louis Vuitton's spring-summer show wasn't just about fashion, it was a cultural moment. Beyoncé, Jay-Z, Rihanna, LeBron, every major name in one room. Pharrell debuted as Louis Vuitton's men's creative director. And just as the runway started, the soundtrack flipped to Clipse. Pusha T and No Malice, back together, rapping over luxury beats. But this wasn't some random flex. It was a calculated strike. Pusha took that high-fashion stage and turned it into a lyrical battlefield. His verses cut through the glossy backdrop, sharp and direct. Even Jay-Z gave a subtle nod. Pusha dropped lines aimed straight at Jim Jones, particularly after Jim linked up with Drake, who once called him an honorary Dipset member. It was like watching a chess grandmaster make his move while his opponent was still figuring out where the pieces were. The wild part, fans started running the numbers. Jim and Nas are only 3 years apart. Yet their resumes couldn't look more different. Nas was still dropping heat. Jim still putting out music, technically, but hardly anyone was listening. This wasn't just about one diss. Pusha's moment at Louis Vuitton wasn't accidental. That song was produced by Pharrell Clip, longtime collaborator, recorded right inside Louis Vuitton's Paris headquarters. Pusha didn't just drop music. He delivered a message on a global stage. While Jim was hopping from podcast to podcast, hoping for buzz, Pusha was laying down legacy-defining moves in front of billionaires, fashion icons, and rap royalty.
I had Nas, but remember Nas' first record, The Barbecue, came out when I was in 11th grade. So Nas was my idol when I was young. Like you did, came to dressing, the wordplay, the music, everything. I was a superior Nas fan, period. I'd never take that away from him. But then as I got in the game, you got to realize that your rivals would be idols, and not to take anything away from that. I developed my own style and my own lane that these kids start to gravitate towards the same way I gravitated towards Nas when I was younger and things like that. It's a whole different generation.
The quietest part of all, Pusha didn't do it for clout. He did it with precision. No wasted energy. No wild interviews. Just calculated moves that let the world know there are levels to this. And some folks, like Jim Jones, might have just learned that the hard way. While Jim Jones chased clout online, Nas was busy building real-world influence. In Queens, far from the noise, Nas quietly launched Resorts World Queens, a $5 billion casino and entertainment complex covering 350,000 square feet. This wasn't about rap beef anymore. It was infrastructure, equity, and long-term wealth for his borough. No need for headlines or diss tracks. Nas let moves like that speak for him. 2 artists, 2 lanes. On one side, you had Nas and Pusha T, moving like chess masters, each step calculated, each move deliberate. These weren't men chasing fleeting headlines or social media trends. They played the long game, strategic in both music and business, setting pieces in motion years in advance. And while their moves might not always light up Twitter feeds or Instagram stories, the weight behind them resonated in quieter, more enduring ways. Meanwhile, in another corner of the culture, Jim Jones was still trying to prove he belonged. His energy felt like it was stuck somewhere around 2008, bragging about Summer Jam bookings and radio spins, as if those things still held the same currency they once did. In a landscape where artists had graduated from mixtapes to mogul status, Jones seemed intent on convincing everyone that he still had a seat at the table, posting up freestyle videos and event flyers with a sense of urgency that felt almost nostalgic. The contrast was hard to ignore. While Jones was chasing moments, Nas didn't need to say a single word. It wasn't about tweets, interviews, or public debates. Nas let his actions speak, and those actions hit harder than any diss track could. One subtle Instagram post told the entire story, a picture of Resorts World Queens, a luxury casino and hotel complex in the heart of New York, with a caption that didn't even flex overtly. The implication was enough. Nas wasn't out here posting about shows or squabbles. He was investing in buildings, properties, and assets that would outlast any rap beef or viral freestyle. That single post stirred more conversation than 100 subtweets. Fans and observers flooded the comments. One summed it up perfectly: someone's chasing clout. Nas is out here buying buildings. Another added, real respect isn't tweeted, it's executed. These weren't just throwaway remarks. They captured a deeper truth about where the culture had evolved. Hip-hop, once all about lyrical dominance and street credibility, had expanded its definition of success. The new era's power players weren't just measured by how many bars they could spit on Hot 97 or how many heads they could turn at a festival. Now, it was about ownership, generational wealth, and long-term influence. Nas, with his quiet investments, through ventures like Queensbridge Venture Partners, had become a blueprint for that evolution. It wasn't just Resorts World Queens. Nas had stakes in everything from tech startups like Coinbase to beverage brands and real estate developments. While Jones was arguing over mic time and show slots, Nas was sitting in boardrooms, negotiating deals with venture capitalists and real estate magnates. The chessboard had changed, and not everyone was playing the same game. Pusha T fit into this dynamic in his own way. Though his moves were less visible in the investment space, he carried the same deliberate energy in his artistic decisions. Whether it was releasing tightly curated albums or aligning himself with high-end brands and business ventures, Pusha wasn't rushing for clicks or clout either. He understood the value of patience and precision. Another chess master in a room full of checkers players. The deeper question all this raised wasn't just about Nas or Jones individually, it was about legacy. What kind of mark were these artists leaving behind? What mattered more, being the loudest voice in the room for a moment, or quietly building something that would stand long after the music faded? For many watching from the sidelines, the answer was increasingly clear. The thing about chasing clout is that it burns fast. 1 minute you're the center of attention. The next, the crowd has moved on to the next spectacle. But buildings, investments, equity stakes, those things don't fade when the cameras turn off. They generate wealth in silence, accruing value year after year. Nas seemed to understand that at a fundamental level. Even his demeanor reflected that evolution. There was a calmness to Nas in recent years, a quiet confidence that didn't require validation from rap blogs or hot take podcasts. He had already won, in ways most people wouldn't even realize until years later. Resorts World Queens wasn't just a building. It was a statement. It said, while others were fighting for scraps of attention, he was securing his future and the future of his family and community. Jim Jones's hustle shouldn't be disrespected. There's no denying he'd carved out his own lane and worked hard to maintain his relevance. But standing next to someone like Nas, the difference in energy and focus was hard to miss. It wasn't just about work ethic, it was about vision. One man was still hustling for short-term wins. The other was playing the long game, setting up moves that would matter long after the crowd had stopped clapping. And that's the quiet brilliance of artists like Nas and Pusha T. They understood the game had changed. The real flex wasn't in what you posted or shouted about, it was in what you didn't have to say at all. Your moves spoke for you. Your investments spoke for you. Your legacy spoke for you. In the end, it wasn't about who had the hottest freestyle or who got the last word on social media. It was about who left behind something real, something concrete. And as that Resorts World Queens post made clear, Nas wasn't just making music anymore. He was making history when Jim finally stepped onto the Summer Jam 2024 stage. Hoping for redemption, things fell flat. The crowd wasn't feeling it. Then came the real shock. Funk Flex, long considered one of Jim's biggest supporters, cut the set short. You could see it in Jim's face, weeks of hype and interviews. And when the spotlight hit, there wasn't enough music to back it up, just controversy. Even after that flop, Jim didn't let it go. He kept firing shots, this time, making it personal. But while Jim chased podcast views, Pusha T stayed quiet, plotting. Insiders began whispering about a serious project in the works, something calculated and ruthless. What fans heard during the Louis Vuitton runway show wasn't the end, it was just the intro. Sources say CLAPS' reunion album is aimed precisely at Jim Jones. No filler. No wasted bars. Each track, sharper than the last. Some insiders even called it Pusha T's Coke Bear moment, a point of no return where he's fully embraced the villain role. Focused not on peace or approval, but total destruction. While Jim was still spitting freestyles in Harlem alleyways, Pusha T was dropping records from inside Louis Vuitton's Paris headquarters, redefining power and positioning in rap culture. But Jim made things worse. He tried flipping the same chains and whips beat from Paris, dropping his own freestyle over it. It flopped hard. The internet wasn't kind. Then he crossed another line, dragging No Malice into it. No Malice, who left rap for a path of faith, had stayed clear of the drama. Mentioning him felt not just disrespectful, but unnecessary. And yet, Pusha T said nothing. No Instagram posts, no interviews. He doesn't move on impulse. He waits. And when he strikes, it's deliberate. Jim's final stumble came during an interview where he dismissed Clips's chains and whips, acting like he'd never listened to them and never cared. But it didn't sound like confidence. It sounded like deflection. The audience could hear it. The industry felt it. What began as rap beef was now something deeper. A credibility crisis. Jim Jones had crossed too many lines. And for the first time in a long while, the culture itself seemed to pull back. Quietly but definitely. Now, even the blogs are flaming him. Die-hard Dipset loyalists, people who once rode for Jim no matter what, are stepping back, saying it's time for him to fall back for real. What started as a battle of words became a hard lesson in legacy class and restraint. Jim thought he was standing toe-to-toe with Nas and Pusha T, like they were all peers in the same tier. But instead, he walked into a masterclass and got schooled, while Jim was talking loud on every mic he could find. Nas and Pusha responded with silence and strategy. Nas kept stacking wins and building generational power. Pusha moved in shadows, picking his shots like a surgeon. No petty freestyles, no desperate IG rants, just cold, deliberate moves. Now Jim's not trending. He's not on the playlists. He's barely part of the conversation. A once name now fading in real time. And the wildest part, that Clipse album hasn't even dropped yet. If the rumors about that record are true, it might not just be another diss. It could be the final blow, not just to Jim's image, but to his entire brand. Jim fired shots at giants. Now those giants are closing in without even raising their voices. While Jim fades into background noise, Nas is building empires. Pusha T is circling, quiet, patient, deadly. If you thought this back and forth was wild, what's coming next could be something bigger. An industry-level takedown. The writing's on the wall. The only question now, will Jim read it before it's too late?